while it's a 10 kilowatt hour battery, it's still a 5 kilowatt hour lift weight.
Okay.
So it's still a two-person install. They can be stacked vertically, they can be stacked side by side.
Whereas if you can do your MID switching right here at the meter base, you really don't have to touch the house wire.
So much smaller, very powerful, very good LRA. I think this is a great product, and it looks beautiful, by the way.
The smarter way to go solar.
Hi everyone, Joe Ordia here from Solar Surge, and today we're coming to you from Enphase headquarters here in Fremont, California. This morning I'm joined by Raghu Belur, co-founder and chief product officer here at Enphase, and we're looking at the brand new 4th generation Enphase IQ battery system. So Raghu, it's really good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise, Joe. Good to see you again. Thank you. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
We've made a lot of changes
to
the product since we met last time. I think we were talking about the
5P.
3rd generation product.
Correct, yeah. 5P battery had just launched.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I was a little bit critical. After a few months in the marketplace, 5P I just felt was too small of a battery for what the marketplace needed.
Sure.
A lot of the competitors have kind of gone bigger, bigger in that last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the new 4th generation Enphase system. Of course, we got the IQ battery 10C and some other components as well.
I think the key here for the audience to know that it's a system. It's not just the battery.
Right.
Let's take a step back. Actually, the 5th generation product has been really well received in the market because of all the improvements that we made since the previous generation. One of the things that I'm very proud about Enphase is we are a learning organization. We take a lot of input from the field. If we mess up, which we do, we acknowledge the mess up and we fix it. And our customers like us for that because they recognize that we take their inputs very seriously. So every generation of the product we have made better. Every generation of the system we have made better, both on the hardware side, on the communication side, as well as the software side. So one of the things that we did with the 3rd generation product was we solved the problem. We went to wired communication, which made the communication very, very reliable. So that was a big step forward. The second thing that we did with the 5th generation product, the 3rd generation product, which is the 5P, was we doubled the power with a very good, very high C rate. And what that allowed us to do was, again, be able to start heavier loads in a backup situation. Then as we were developing the 4th generation system, we got input from the field again. Hey, what are the things that the 5th generation could be done better? And one of them you pointed out was 5 kilowatt hours not big enough.
Right, I mean, the reality is, at least where I live on the East Coast, you have larger homes, you have multiple large air conditioning units. So to get a true whole house backup, you had to install 4 of the 5P batteries, which means not only is it 4 batteries, but it's the battery combiner, the system controller, all these other boxes on the wall to get to the solution that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you have to really think about batteries and what's the use case for the batteries, right? The use case for batteries is pretty broad, right? If you think about it, if you are in a situation where the tariffs are complex, like a California NEM3, or if you're in Europe where you may have dynamic tariffs where you get your buy and sell rate 24 hours ahead, the use of the battery may be slightly different. It may be purely for doing arbitrage. So take your battery, it may be a grid-tied battery, you have your software, and the software intelligently decides when to charge the battery, discharge the battery, buy from the grid, sell to the grid, etc., and really bill optimize the homeowner's requirements.
Correct. But in order to get the best payback for that, you have to be able to shed the heaviest loads or to self-consume on the heaviest loads, like air conditioning, for example.
Precisely. This is for the grid-tied system.
Yeah.
But I think the battery can have dual use cases. Like we are saying, most of the time, 95%, 98% of the time, it's doing arbitrage. But then during that time, if the grid were to fail, it needs to provide backup, which means it needs to support the heavy loads in the home. So you're absolutely right. So in general, the 5 kilowatt hour building block was a little bit small. And so that's why with the 4th generation battery, that's the big change we have made, is we went to a 10 kilowatt hour building block while maintaining the same C rate, because people like the C rate, the power in the battery, and while still keeping the wired communication, which people really liked because that made the communication that much more reliable.
Sure.
But we made some more improvements to it. Right? While it's a 10 kilowatt hour battery, it's still a 5 kilowatt hour lift weight.
Okay.
So it's still a 2-person install.
Okay.
See,
good.
the problem with going to bigger and bigger batteries, it's not technology to build a big battery. I can build a 50 kilowatt hour battery,
Yeah.
but you'll need a crane to put it in place.
Yeah, right.
You don't want to do that, right? The beauty of the Enphase technology and the fact that we leverage things like microinverters is we can make it modular. So while we went to a 10 kilowatt hour system or 10 kilowatt hour battery, it's still a 5 kilowatt hour lift weight. So it's still a 2-person install.
Okay, so
So
explain
what you
this.
see is-
So what we see here, is this just the outer container, or there are two 5 kilowatt hour modules inside?
There are 5 kilowatt hour install modules inside.
Okay.
You still need the full 10 kilowatt hour to operate, but
Okay.
it's built as 2 blocks of 5.
Okay.
That allows us to install as a 2-person install.
So maximum weight for each
It'd be
individual.
125 pounds.
125 pounds. Okay.
Right? If we had kept it as one monolithic block of 250 pounds, that becomes immediately a 3-person install with lift
equipment.
and everything. And then the advantage that we are known for, which is the modularity, goes away. Right?
Right.
Second is you also get, if you do it in 2 blocks like that, you still maintain the reliability due to redundancy. Because we
Okay.
still have multiple inverters in here.
So are they two parallel 5 kilowatt hour units? If one fails, you still get half the capacity?
Precisely. In fact,
Okay.
one fails, you still continue to get the other half. In fact, there are 2 inverters in here. If one inverter were to fail, you still get the others to continue operating.
Okay, so you're still using the microinverters internally to do
Correct.
that inverter charging. Are they arranged differently to get
Yeah,
the
great.
tighter energy density? Because it seems like a more dense battery.
It is a much more dense battery. It's 62% less wall space. Of course, it's deeper, but it's 62% less wall space, which is a huge advantage as well. So what this battery does, the way we accomplished that was by doing what Enphase does best, which is greater integration. So we took what was the power conversion unit, we made it bigger, and
Okay.
we had a separate battery management system in the 5th generation product.
Right.
I keep saying
yeah,
5th, sorry, the
but the
3rd
5P,
generation
yeah,
product,
the
the 5P.
Yeah.
And we integrated that into the power conversion itself.
Okay, because this was another issue too that we were getting back from the field, was that since each 5P battery had its own BMS, you have a higher idle draw just to have the battery turned on.
I'm not sure about that. The BMS doesn't draw much power at all.
Okay.
Actually, that redundancy helps you. It's being smart about how you manage the inverters that are in there.
Okay.
So
okay.
what we have done now is that the integration of the power electronics and the BMS and making the power electronics bigger means we could reduce the wall footprint by 62%.
Great.
Right? The last thing that we did in this is, and this has an impact on the balance of system, and that was that now this synthesizes in neutral.
Okay.
In the older system, in the 3rd generation system with the 5P, the balance of system had to synthesize a neutral because everything was 240 volts. So if you wanted to run a 120 volt load, which you typically do when you're running off grid, we needed to synthesize a neutral, which was done using what's called a neutral forming transformer, which is a big hunk of copper and iron.
Was that in the battery or was that in the old system
It was in
controller?
the old system controller.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Right?
Is that why that was so big?
So that went away.
Okay.
Okay. So
couple
let
of
me
questions for you.
summarize. Sorry, please go ahead.
Like, can these be stacked multiple batteries vertically?
They can be stacked vertically, they can be stacked side by side, and all of those we have complete flexibility around it while still maintaining the 2-person install. And we
Okay.
have done all of the safety testing, the large scale fire testing, UL 9540A, and all the extensions of that. What that allows you to do is ensure that even if you stack, that the propagation of fire doesn't take place.
So Raghu, to summarize, in terms of capacity, what are we looking at in terms of power output?
So for every 10 kilowatt hours, you get 7.1 kilowatts of power.
Okay.
But the more important character there is that it's got a 90 amp LRA. For every 10 kilowatt hours, you get 90 amp, which is locked rotor amp, which is a critical unit to start air conditioners. So
Right.
if you add 2 of them, which is what is for a typical home, if you're doing whole home
home, yeah,
backup,
yeah.
you want to do 20 kilowatt hours, you get 180 amps of LRA,
LRA,
that
yeah.
is that can easily start a 5-ton air conditioner.
Great.
So
great.
much smaller, very powerful, very good LRA. I think this is a great product, and it looks beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, aesthetically,
Yeah, it
Enphase is
looks
always,
beautiful.
always
it's a
good looking.
Still a two-person
Two-person install. And I would say, too, for probably 90% plus people, I'm going to recommend 2 of these batteries for a whole house backup. But as you said, this is really a platform. It's not just the battery,
Precisely.
right? We talk about the battery, but let's look at some of the other components. I know there's a lot of innovation into modernizing the combiner as well. So can we talk about that next?
Yeah, so again, in the spirit of us being a learning organization, while they like a number of features of the 3rd generation battery, and you can see the improvements we made in the 4th generation battery, we also got a lot of feedback on the balance of system. So let's take a step back and philosophically think about how we approach the balance of system problem, right? We always believe that rather than doing partial home backup, right, where you're creating a partial or a backup
Like
load
a critical
panel,
loads
etc.,
panel,
or a critical loads panel, our philosophy is that really should do whole home backup with load rejection, right?
Right.
That way, just don't even think about it, back up the entire home, and then go find those 1 or 2 loads like your hot tub or your pool pump, etc., that you may want to discard when a grid outage takes place, right? So that's the mindset that we went with. So in order to make that better, what we did was we built a new combiner box that integrates a number of balance of system functions. So you can land your PV in here. You can land 4 circuits of PV just like before. You can land 2 80 amp circuits of batteries. It used to land in the system controller before.
And what is that in terms of in number of
Up
batteries?
to 40 kilowatt hours.
So up to 4 batteries.
Yep, you can
land
land in
combiner.
here into the combiner. You can land 4 20 amp circuits of PV.
Okay.
You can land 40 kilowatt hours of batteries in here. In fact, you can go even higher when using PCS.
Okay. Well, I notice you also have an EV charger now here.
You can land an EV charger in here as well, right? If you so choose to, and you can land. This is also a built-in load controller.
So you have smart circuit controls here.
So we got you got an 80 amp load control built in. So this is why we were saying is think about it, whole home backup, and you can dump up to 80 amps of load.
Okay. Okay. So. Right. Okay, so I'm thinking, like you said, if you have a hot tub, maybe, or you have an
extra air conditioner that you don't want to run,
correct,
right, during an outage.
So
you have
the
20
system
kilowatt hours.
will just drop that automatically.
All done in software.
During a blackout, the rest of the home stays energized with solar and battery.
And the combination of the fact that this does neutral forming, we can land solar, we can land battery, we can land EV charger, all of that in here, right? And load control means. Where did the system controller go? Oh, it's gone.
Right, because your switching is happening here too, right?
Everything is happening here.
Your transfer switch is happening here. Okay.
Everything is happening here. No, sorry. This is the point of aggregation. The actual MID function, which was the isolation device, which used to be inside the system controller, which created a limitation in that it forced a co-location problem, meaning that system controller, which was a very big unit, had to be placed right next to the main panel.
Very close to the service entrance.
We took that MID function, and again, this is part of the decentralization thinking that we always have. Hey, the MID is a standalone function. Let it do its MID function, which is make sure that if the grid is not present, open the MID, etc. We took that MID function and we put it inside a meter collar.
Perfect.
And that's right behind you, and that's our meter collar.
Okay.
It's a UL 414 approved meter collar. And it can be in many forms, right? It can be underneath a meter, like it's shown here. It can also be completely standalone, which means the meter is separate from it, and you just install it in a meter panel.
Okay. I think installers are really going to like this because I know, like you said, there was a co-location problem where if you couldn't get the large system controller right next to the electric meter, it became very expensive to have to jump that circuit back over and then back.
High current circuit too.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very high wire gauge.
Yeah.
It became very expensive for the installer. But then there's also just the issue of risk for the installer, right? When the more that the installer has to disrupt the internal house wiring, or maybe they encounter wiring that's out of code, and now they feel they're compelled to bring all that wiring back up to code. Whereas if you can do your MID switching right here at the meter base, you really don't have to touch the house wiring. Touch the house wiring, right? And then all of your solar and battery is aggregated here in the controller, or in the combiner.
In the combiner.
The new combiner.
So the combiner, basically, one way to think about the combiner is took the old combiner and the old system controller and the load control devices.
Yeah, and the old battery combiner.
And the old battery combiner, and all integrated them into one.
Yeah.
The thing about integration, I'm always a little bit concerned about integration because does it become a point of failure? The fact is we are not doing any power conversion in this device. This is simply aggregating.
Aggregation, yeah.
Point of aggregation with protection devices, that's what it is. With one difference, we added the CTs in here. So you don't even have to thread the wire, PV wire, through the CTs. They're all pre-installed PV CTs. We also have pre-installed battery CTs. We also have pre-installed load CTs. So, and all the consumption CTs are also pre-installed inside the meter collar.
Great. So no extra equipment, which means you can monitor solar production, battery input output, as well as home load.
As well as without having to ever touch a CT. And the reason why I am emphatic about CTs is because CTs have, all our partners will tell us, CTs are very error prone from an installation point of view. And we have taken that pain point completely out of the picture. There'll be a day when CT won't be in the vernacular of our partners as they're doing Enphase installations, right? There are actually a few more very, very cool things that we have done in the Combiner 6, right?
Okay.
With the Combiner 6, obviously this lands, the output of this, which aggregates all the DERs, right? The distributed energy resources, your solar, your battery, even your EV charger, etc. The output of this now lands in the main panel, right? Regardless of whether it's a 100 amp main panel or a 200 amp main panel, you can land up to 100 amps of current from this device onto the main panel.
Okay. Does that mean that there's...
Because the 120% rule does not necessarily apply because we have what's called power control system. So we have bus bar PCS that ensures that the output, that we are never overloading, say, a 100 amp bus bar. Even if there's a 100 amp source from your DERs. Because the system looks at the output of this, looks at the generation from the grid, and ensures that you're never overloading. If it's a 100 amp bus bar, never more than 100. If it's 200 amp bus bar, no more.
And the installer would set that on the app, or is it something set physically here within the combiner?
It's all in software. You would set it in the app and say, this is, my PCS limit is set at this. PCS is power control system.
Okay, so quick learning opportunity for you guys here. What we're talking about here is, let's say you have an electrical panel that's rated for 100 amps. Well, in theory, if you have a system here that could produce, let's say, 100 amps just from solar and battery alone, and you had a connection to the grid that could provide 100 amps also, then potentially you could have 200 amps of current feeding into your electrical panel could overheat and cause a fire. So what we're talking about here is basically this combiner is going to control to make sure that regardless of how much power is potentially available from all those different sources, no more than 100 amps is going into that that load center if that's what it was set for.
Precisely. And so you're not limited to the 20 amp breaker on a 100 amp panel to comply with the 120% rule.
Correct.
So that doesn't apply anymore. So in theory, right, there should never be a need to do main panel upgrades anymore. So CTs are gone, main panel upgrades are gone, right?
Great.
There's one more thing that this thing does really, really well. There is a built-in DER relay in here, a 100 amp DER relay. What that 100 amp DER relay allows us to do is, in the event of a black start, and this is, by the way, very unique to Enphase, right? The combination of the IQ8 on the roof that synthesizes its own grid, right? So let's assume for a moment your batteries are completely drained. You're in a multi-day outage, right? Your batteries are completely drained. In a typical system, what would happen is the battery synthesizes the grid, and then the PV says, oh, I see a grid, and connects to it. So the battery has to be the first one to synthesize the grid. If the battery is not capable of being able to synthesize a grid, this is in an outage, PV never starts up even though the sun is shining. But with Enphase, if you have an IQ8 on the roof, the IQ8 synthesizes a grid independent of the battery. So the IQ8 can start charging the battery. But there was one problem. The problem was the loads were always connected. So the IQ8 in the morning would start waking up, starting to charge the battery, and then the loads would be present and the microgrid would collapse. But with the Combiner 6, what we have done is we have an isolation relay built in here. So the moment the battery collapses or the microgrid collapses, this relay opens. So the DER, the solar, the battery is all isolated from the load. So when the sun first wakes up, it doesn't see any load. So all the power that the solar is generating starts to charging the battery. The moment the battery fills up, even up to 10% or 20%, and you can set that, boom, you can bring the loads back up. So you don't have to do a truck roll anymore
to jumpstart
the battery in the event of a microgrid collapse.
Great.
I think that's really an amazing feature, the combination of IQ8 and this DER isolation relay built into this.
Yeah, well, Raghu, it sounds like you've really listened to feedback from the installation community and really simplified the offering here.
And we do watch your videos as well. So we do look at those. We get feedback from all our sources. Of course, the biggest source of feedback is just learning from the field, right?
Yeah.
And so massive improvements, like I said, I think we have made the battery much better, much more compact, 10 kilowatt hour building block, and all the benefits that I talked about. But I think we have done a lot of work in making the balance of system much better. Of course, the hero of the show there is the Combiner 6C. And finally, we have also made this 15-year warranty.
Great.
So the battery is 15 years. This device is 15 years. The meter collar, which is the MID right behind you, the microgrid interconnect device, is also 15 years. And of course, our PV solar is 25
years.
Right?
Now, question for you, Raghu. If, let's say somebody is installing just solar only. I know here in California, pretty much everybody is doing solar with storage now. On the East Coast, we still have net metering in a lot of markets. Let's say they want to start with Enphase solar only. Would they still use the Combiner 6C? Or would they use the old combiner and then replace it with the 6C when it's time to add batteries or EV? I
think the 6C future-proofs it, right? I would recommend going with the 6C. That way you can land your solar in here today, recognizing that, hey, my power needs are going to go up. I may need more solar. The regulations may change. I may need net metering may go away, just like it did in California, just like it's going away in other states. And I go, I may need batteries in the future, or I may want to put batteries on only to do backup. But anymore, the role of battery continues to evolve. It used to do arbitrage. It used to do backup. Now you're starting to do a lot of VPP functions with the battery. Right? The combination of this battery and the Combiner 6 can be very powerful for bill optimization, including VPP. Of course, this is a flexible device. It's a flex device. I can discharge it or charge it anytime I choose to, based on an external input, which is a VPP input. I can even dump loads, part of my load controller, while in grid-tied operation. I can say, hey, that's a heavy load. I need to maximize value by exporting into the grid, exporting the battery and the solar into the grid. Let me dump the loads. I can do that as well. So it enables a combination of bill optimization through arbitrage, backup, as well as complete VPP.
Okay, and the system can function with solar microinverters only. The battery doesn't have to be present for the Combiner 6 to work.
Correct. This is a future-proof device. Yet tomorrow you may decide to go buy an EV.
Yeah, and I know, again, for my days installing, if I were to offer this Enphase solution today, I would be offering this as a grid-tied, battery-ready, and EV charger-ready solution using the latest generation combiner knowing that, if you installers, you're saving yourself a lot of work when it does come time to add the battery storage in. Everything's already here for you.
Yep, exactly. And it's all backward compatible. You can just put the battery in, wire it up in here, and you're done.
Great.
Right? The last, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, is all the software work that we have done. We've done an incredible amount of work in terms of improving things like self-consumption. Self-consumption is one basic software function, which is, hey, if I'm overproducing, charge my battery. If I'm underproducing, discharge my battery. But tariffs are becoming more complicated, right? Complex. If you look at California NEM 3.0, there's nothing NEM about 3.0.
No, it's not really
it's a net billing tariff, really, right?
Yeah.
Where the buy and sell rates are very different. And you have time of use as well. You get paid for exporting certain times of the day, etc. And so we have really developed a very sophisticated AI-based optimization algorithm that couples very nicely with this hardware that allows you to maximize your return on investment by minimizing your bill. And it's making intelligent decisions that's saying, hey, when do you charge the battery? When do you discharge the battery? When do you sell to the grid? When do you buy from the grid? Because there are times when it's good for you to buy from the grid because the grid is really inexpensive.
Now, does the homeowner or does the installer have to set those rates in the software, or are you pulling from the utility to know what those?
We are pulling from the utility. The installer just has to confirm that yes, this is the right place. You're in PG&E territory. You're in the following, and NBT rate. You just confirm it, and you're good to go. But we pull everything directly.
Very cool.
Even our EV charger also fully integrates into this device. And of course, it's only a matter of time before that EV charger is going to become fully bidirectional. And when it does, now you're seeing so much available resource, right, to run the home. You're just going to continue to maximize your self-consumption.
Okay, I've got to put you on the spot a little bit now. Then.
Go ahead.
When do you think the audience can expect a market-ready bidirectional EV solution?
I expect it to be next year.
Okay.
I think we are making very, very good progress internally, right? We have developed the hardware for it. We have developed the software for it. We are continuing to test it. But we need a car. We need a compliant car, right?
Car manufacturer.
A compliant car, and that's just the car industry tends to be much more conservative in that sense, and so I think we are going to be ahead of them in the sense that we'll be ready before they'll be ready. The beauty is we are taking a very standards approach to developing our EV charger. Even the EV charger that we have today, the very traditional EV charger that we have, just a charging device. We are going to release the next generation of it here in the US in Q3, and it's going to be fully standards compliant. Like it's going to be compliant to OCPP on the back end, backhaul to the cloud, and to talk to the car, it's going to be ISO 15118 compliant, because then the handshake between the device and the car is much, much more intelligent. You get things like state of charge information from the car, which we have not been able to get before. So we have taken a very standards approach to the bidirectional device as well. It's also going to be completely standards compliant. That way, if a car is standards compliant, it should be a seamless integration.
Right. And again, I know that many of you out there are wondering, when is it going to be ready, Joe? You've been talking about bidirectional EV for years now, but it's really not a technical limitation at this point. It is a matter of, as you said, standards, right? Getting the different stakeholders to agree on how the devices are going to communicate with each other, what the limits are. But technically, in theory, I mean, the technology is ready, right?
The technology is ready.
We just have to agree that we're all going to do it in a certain way.
In fact, that's the beauty of the technology platform we have built, right? The IQ8 is a platform that we have built. IQ9 is the next generation of that platform, right? And that's a fully bidirectional platform.
Okay.
IQ8 on the roof is unidirectional. Takes solar and goes to, takes DC from the PV panel, goes to grid compliant AC, completely IEEE 1547 compliant AC, right? Similarly, the batteries, same IQ8 platform that's running in here that takes the DC from the battery and is grid compliant AC and of course fully bidirectional. Think about this with 4 wheels missing, right? That's exactly what a bidirectional EV charger is.
Okay, last question then. What can we tease for the audience as far as the new IQ9 Micro-inverter that we've heard about? And how will that fit into the rest of all of this?
We really are backward compatible, so IQ9 should come in and it should be pretty seamless for our installer partners. But internally, the technology is next level. One of the core tenets of our of Enphase is decentralization, distributed architectures, but it's also based on semiconductors. And for the first time, you'll be seeing some really advanced semiconductor technology called gallium nitride in there. And that brings performance, cost, reliability benefits. The beauty of it is that it's the starting point for another long journey of improved performance, improved reliability, and improved cost. And so I think that has a technology leap that's more internal to begin with, but very quickly you'll see the benefits of it because it's going to connect to much larger modules as modules move to TOPCon and perovskite and energy power density. If the modules increases, Enphase uniquely benefits from that because we can make the inverters perfectly match what the module requirements are. So IQ9 as a platform gets used up on the roof, gets used in here, gets used in the bi-directional EV charger, and on, and whatever next thing that we think about. So it's a combination of improvement, in continuing to improve the battery, continuing to improve the balance of system. By the way, we are not done here. We've got more improvements coming in the 6C. We've got more improvements coming in the battery, right? We live by the Silicon Valley philosophy: you innovate or die.
Constantly innovate,
right?
yeah.
So
well, I think that's it. I mean, Enphase really does
do.
have the reputation, I think, of really being on the leading edge and constantly innovating, but also, importantly, listening to feedback from installers from the field. And it comes through clear with the 4th generation platform that you've adjusted and adapted to based on the feedback you're getting from installers in the field.
Without a doubt. I mean, they are our partners. We have to listen to them,
yeah.
And which we do a lot of. And like I said, we don't always get it right. We do make mistakes. But I feel like if we listen to our partners and we correct it, we'll do the right thing for them. Lots of improvements coming on the software side. Again, we don't, it's not obvious, but you'll see really improved benefits for the homeowner. The last part is, this is not just about self-consumption anymore, right? We are moving into a world of energy markets, right? These systems will start participating in energy markets. It's happening already outside of the US. And you're starting to look at things like day-ahead tariffs. Like Illinois is moving to a day-ahead tariff, one of the first markets to move to day-ahead tariffs. California with net billing tariff simulates or mimics a day-ahead market, right, where the rates change.
Right. It's so complex that you have to have software optimization to manage it.
And you need very sophisticated software to optimize that. And then finally, can you bid your devices into the market and make additional monies? All done in the background. Can I bid the capacity that I have in here into the market, make additional monies, right? Can I take my EV charger, which is a flex load again, as it becomes bi-directional, can I bid that into the market as a V2G function, right? Not just V2H, but V2G as well. That's why being standards compliant, that's why having the 20 years of knowledge on grid interaction becomes extremely critical. So a lot of improvements that are happening, not just on the hardware side, but on the software side. But I'm super excited about this 4th generation system. I think everything that we have done on the battery, the balance of system, I think can be a pretty big game changer for our partners.
Very exciting, very exciting. Well, folks, again, this has been a chat with Raghu Belur. He's the co-founder and chief product officer here at Enphase, and you've seen a presentation of the new Enphase 4th generation solar and battery system. Raghu, thanks again for spending so much time with us.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming.
And thank you all for spending some more time on the Solar Surge channel. But that pretty much does it for today's video. As always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.